there's been some interesting themes coming up over these last few presentations. I loved sort of Michael Jenkins' image. I'd say this image of an empty chair. He was just illustrating the word chair. Actually, I think in a way that's quite good, because often what we end up with is the chief HR officer talking to a bit of an empty chair, because the chief executive and even the chairman sometimes are too busy worrying about the customers, the shareholders, all the other stakeholders except the employees, who they kind of take for granted. Oh well, and HR will look after them anyway, not recognizing, of course, that the people are the key asset to most organizations. So that, I think, was an interesting image. I can't get my mind off the image of dancing. Probably have a two's company, three's a crowd, as Michael said. So we could have the HR officer dancing with the CEO without stepping on their toes, which is good as well. So there's some interesting images. But all these point to something that Rudi was pointing out as part of the first session, which is thinking longer term. And Michael said the same thing in terms of development of people. It's like the jazz band image. You've got individuals there who are individuals who do their own thing, but they can collaborate together. And if we're using AI sensibly, as Jennifer says, then what we can do is use the technology to help people work more effectively together, not have it take over how we work. It can help us with what. But I think we're talking about HR looking at the quality of the working experience and the human. I mean, again, it's back to the leadfluencer being somebody who's looking at the influence, the way that the leaders can exercise an authority over other people without being authoritarian. The days of command and control are gone. Leaders in the days of social media and influencing, in the days of individuals having a choice as to where they go, then I think the leaders have to rely on influence to do their job. And I'll come back with a question, Sabine, in a second. It just reminds me, there's been a recent article in the Harvard Business Review on the subject of work being an employment, being essentially a product. A lot of HR people are now working with their marketing departments on selling the experience of working for their organization to a customer, the employee or the prospective employee being the customer, because they are buying something, a key part of their life. They're going to work. Each month, it's like a subscription to a magazine each month or something. You are renting a job because you are renting that person. It's a monthly salary in repayment for an experience. So they can turn that experience off at a month's notice and go somewhere else. So how are employers looking on work as something more than just a set of tasks and a job? How can it be an experience that fits into somebody's life? And that's I think one of the key messages. So let's start with Sabine. One of the comments in the comments has been around leadfluencer being a definition for the new generation. Do you see that happening, Sabine?
Yeah, thank you to Murat for putting this up. And if possible, I might steal it to give it a new title for the next speech. Yeah, because I think that's a good one. It's maybe a new generation definition. And I mean, we cannot ignore the role of the influencer, especially for young people, for all of us. And maybe we can lead them to being more ethical and being more authentic. And I think this could also be an impressive change that we all can do it, especially also for the HR people, for dealing with the new generation or other generations. Thank you.
I think we're saying that the younger generation are much more conscious, perhaps, of the bigger picture. They don't just go to work and turn off their minds from the rest of their life. And indeed, they don't turn off their mind from what's happening in the bigger world. So, Rudi, do you find it's a generational thing that the younger generation are much more environmentally conscious, socially conscious, conscious of sustainability? And is it the older generation who need a wake-up call?
Yes, I think so. I think the younger generation definitely more. We have also seen in the climate movement led by the youngsters, and it is actually all our generation, the baby boomers, and even the millenniums that are not with it yet. But I think the Generation Z has it, and definitely need to prepare Generation Alpha. I think they got the message, and also you see it into their comments and say, "What world are you leaving us?" That's actually also why you see a lot of depression among young people, because they don't know which world they're going to live in the future.
Okay, Jennifer, we assume that the new generation coming through with technology are just so familiar with it that it's kind of just there, and they don't necessarily question what it's doing to their lives because they can't remember a time before. Does it actually need an older generation to stop and think, hang on, before we just accept what technology is doing to us, we need to step back and think about the bigger impact of AI, for example?
Yes, a lot of different things in that question. I mean, I would say that the millennials through the Gen Zers, I mean, they have used technology in their personal lives. They've learned with technology. They've collaborated with it through all of their periods of development. So, from my experience and all of the research, they know intuitively, they know ingrained how to best work with technology. They know to ask those questions. The ones that are really switched on, I mean, they are questioning a lot. The Gen Zers are the biggest questioners of everything today because they do see how badly the previous generations have impacted the planet. So they're very they're very inquisitive and questioning, but they're not afraid of the technology. They use it intelligently. And in fact, that's one of the things that some of the companies in the study I referenced and a couple of our clients are doing. It's reverse mentoring. So matching the 58-year-old with the 27-year-old. And the 58-year-old gives much more context of why do we do things the way we've done it and what's been the history and the legacy. But heavily the real benefit is the 27-year-old helps the other person see how they can best utilize technology.
Okay, yes, I was just thinking there, Michael S., in terms of the learning process. Young people are coming up with technology, they understand it, but AI is something, it's almost so radical that do we think there's a real knowledge understanding gap between generations? So the older managers, leaders, just kind of don't quite get it. They don't get social media. That's something that grandchildren do, you know. Is it something that we really need a push in terms of educating a whole generation? Because the technologies move so fast, it's understandable that busy executives are not keeping up with it. Is there a need for some development work here?
Absolutely, Peter. I think for all of us, and myself included, my kids educate me. Actually, they're in their 20s, so I rely on their knowledge and wisdom about technology, and they rely on my money usually. But no, I think you're right, Peter. On a serious note, I think there's an educative role here because I think we're in the middle of a revolution, and often when you're in the middle, you don't know what's coming, you know, and we'll look back and say, oh yeah, that's what it was. So I think we've all got to be open-minded and learn. And I think the main thing is having that growth mindset. And the way I look at it, the example I've talked to some of my medical colleagues who are talking about how technology can support the medical world. And one example they gave of, I think it's skin cancer, where a doctor can actually recognize lots of different types of skin cancer. But if they partner with technology, the machine can go through thousands and thousands of images of skin and more likely to pick out if there's a problem. So that it's partnering with technology and maybe not seeing it as a challenge, but seeing it something that integrates with you to develop your job and develop your own career. So I think that educative role probably goes for everybody, but I think maybe the younger generation has a few advantages.
Okay, yeah. So, Michael J., in terms of the role of the CHRO, should actually there be a CITO in your picture somewhere? Should they be collaborating with the technology people?
Well, it's a really interesting question, and my gut reaction would be that on the technology side, we probably need to have many more people invited to the party. I think Jennifer was mentioning earlier that if we sort of and a bit like I know Rudi has mentioned before on sustainability, if we go out and say, right, you know about sustainability, come and tell us what we need to do. You know about technology, come and tell us what we need to do. It probably needs a much more pervasive approach throughout the entire organization so that we normalize both the tech side, we normalize the sustainability side, and dare I say it, maybe try and link all of them together. And I think that technology is probably the golden thread here. I'll give you one little example. Just judging HR awards here in Singapore, and one particular company has developed a wonderful app. It's an insurance company. And when you go into work of a given day, you can actually select on the app where you would like to work, literally the seat and the table or the desk in the office that you would like to work in. And here's the thing, you can also see where your friends are sitting. So if you want to be able to then, go into the office, sit in a different part of the building, but still hang out with your mates, then you can do that. And I thought that was just such a wonderful juxtaposition of technology with, a very, very human thing. We love to sort of see our good friends at work, when we are actually face to face in the office. So I just thought that was a lovely way of bringing technology together with the very human thing that we love to see people that we love.
It's a good point. It's a nice way of seeing that people can still want to collaborate in teams or avoid being in a team. And there's a bit of technology that helps us to do that. And I think we've seen a lot post-COVID about the remote working, and some leaders forcing people back, perhaps against their will. I quite like the image of the jazz band because it's one that says that they're still individuals. It's not quite as regimented as an orchestra. So they get their own little time to play a solo and so on. But there is still a tune they're all playing to in the end, and they all kind of mostly finish at the same time, which is good. So I think with that and with the dancing, I think this is a kind of an image that maybe leaders still haven't quite got. I think, Sabine, do you think the influencer side of leadership is not strong enough for those where they still have a view of a corporate being a machine and people needing to come to work? I guess one particular point here is the kind of some quite high-profile leaders. Somebody had the nerve to mention Musk, I think, in their presentation, that have forcing people back to work, perhaps against their will. Maybe that's good in terms of productivity, but not so good in terms of well-being for the individuals. Do you think that the HR profession at Sabine should spend more time trying to get the leaders to think more about the impact on people of the way they work? You're muted, Sabine.
We cannot ignore that we are always influencing others. Yeah. So I think when I was in the part of being an HR leader at Lufthansa German Airlines, you always have the responsibility and have the knowledge and the position to really give feedback to leaders. And I think to create more awareness and we all have to learn that it is a lifelong learning journey. Yeah, we cannot quit learning, because if we quit learning, we quit being good. And if we get a lot of feedback, we know exactly what resonates to others, and what does not. So feedback, giving leaders feedback and people feedback how they come across would be a necessary tool. And still, there are lots of these tools who are timeless. And those timeless tools combined with the future and using technology, I think this is an immense possibility we have.
But I guess we're also looking at a world where people want more independence. Again, back to the jazz band image, we've talked about there being more of a gig economy, people wanting to be more self-employed because they get more control over their lives than they can do in an employment situation. Again, I guess back to Michael J, I think, in terms of should HR be encouraging more independence, more loose contracts, more consulting, more networked organizations, as opposed to being employers?
Well, I think Peter, that when you talk about the future of work, there's almost an inevitability around the the decentralized autonomous organizations, or the DAOs. I think that also juxtaposed with some companies that, for example, there's one company called Deel, DEEL, and they were remote from the get-go, from the initial startup phase. They always wanted to be a remote organization. And I think there are now more and more examples of the growth of ecosystems, for instance, that I think we will see more of. Two examples that I could think of. One is the Chinese company Haier in China. They have a very interesting model of an ecosystem-based multiplicity of different tiny organizations all coalescing together when they need to. And then very interestingly, but very quietly in the background, there's a Japanese company which has pioneered something called amoeba working. And that's the amoeba of the the sort of funny shapeless animal, the amoeba, which I think actually dates back at least 10 or 12 years. So that was an exploration of what it would look like to look at being a very disaggregated kind of organization. And to answer your question, I think the CHRO, if not the leads within the human resources group, would be the glue of that. They would be very, very good at keeping the whole thing together, I think. So again, some interesting ways of organizing.
Okay, good. Yes, and Ali's put a comment in the comment column about office flexibility, which supports things you were saying about having social networking areas. I think the whole area of office design for the future is still one that's developing as people learn to do hybrid working. Hot desking's been around for a while, but I think we're still learning how to lead in a hybrid world. I guess we're coming towards the end of the panel, so what I'd just like to do is go around and have a last comment from everybody, particularly aimed, I think, at the future for HR, which is what our common theme is. And in order to get HR thinking more strategically about sustainability, technology, leadership, development, do you have one kind of key final message for HR people in terms of how they can do their bit? In Rudi, if you start in terms of supporting sustainability, any one good piece of advice for HR?
But I would like to see HR to be taking the lead in the breakthrough movement. Okay.
Good. Taking the lead. That's in that one, certainly, yes. Jennifer, any thoughts on HR and AI?
I believe that in a world of AI, HR is going to be even more important than ever before, because AI is being created by and for humans. And so people need to have the confidence, they need to have the support, and they need to have the guardrails of how to dive in, learn, and be part of that creation. And that's the role, I believe, of HR, along with your collaboration with the other leaders in the organization.
Good, thank you, Jennifer. Great. Michael S., the final comment on your area of development.
Yeah, I would say, echoing what others have said, it's all about the growth mindset, isn't it? And forgetting the old rigid thinking that you were maybe brought up with, and thinking about how can you grow yourself, how can you grow your team, and how can we grow the organization, and using AI or Gen AI particularly, as a tool to help us do that.
Great. Okay, Sabine. So, what can HR do in terms of getting leaders to be more leadfluencers?
I think in terms of, I also talked about the room of not knowing. Yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty going on. So instead of wanting to be understood, I would love to take more time to really understand others. And I need to ask a lot of questions instead of making suggestions.
Okay, yes, listening rather than speaking. Often,
and if you quit learning, you quit being good.
Yeah, yes, exactly. I think often leaders get to where they are because they're good at projecting their ideas, not so good at listening to others' ideas. Michael Jenkins, a final word about HR's strategic role?
Yeah, I think that it's very clear that over the years, the CHRO has made, as a kind of role, has made tremendous strides forward in terms of, really being taken seriously in organizations. And I think there are two things to say. One is that pressure is now coming from the board level for greater representation of HROs in at the proverbial top table. I know we've spent years talking about the top table, but also very encouragingly, I think, coming from the other end, Gen Zs that I've been privileged to work with, particularly young HR people, they count empathy as being one of the big things that they want to see in organizations going forward. So I have a lot of optimism that this combination of empathy and tech savviness and also young people coming into the profession will result, maybe not immediately, but in the next 5 to 10 years, in some fantastic CHROs coming into the system.
Okay, that's a great note to end on. Thank you to all our speakers for joining us virtually. Again, using the technology when it works, Michael, to join in. An example of using the technology to be effective in a particular context, a worldwide, in this case, a worldwide conference, doesn't mean that this replaces completely human face-to-face contact. As a forum, we had a meeting in Brussels this week, which we thoroughly enjoyed. Not just a meal in a restaurant together. There's some personal experiences that are quite difficult to replicate over the technology. So, but I guess back to HR's role, that's to identify the valuable experiences that work brings to people's lives and make sure that those don't get lost in a technology-driven world, which I think is the key role. So thank you very much, panel.